Okay, live again. So as you can tell by the title on this video, I accepted a job offer as a remote Ruby on Rails developer. This was my goal from the very beginning of starting my journey as a self-taught developer through the Odin project. And it's been quite the journey, but so far, so good. No regrets. Ton of learning, ton of experience, many moments of feeling like it wouldn't happen or wouldn't be possible. But I never truly believed that it wouldn't. I always, had a goal and that feeling I just wouldn't take no for an answer and that I would make it happen. And yes, I accepted the offer a couple weeks back, and it was very, very exciting time, but also very uncertain times. As you might be aware, I'd done an internship with FreshBooks. I was there for 8 months, and that is a fairly large SaaS company in Toronto, Canada. And I was working remotely with them as an intern. They gave me an offer for a third term with them, but I declined because I really wanted to pursue Ruby on Rails, and they'd just gone through a round of firing and layoffs. So I wasn't sure really what my future would look like at that company. I didn't want to accept a 4 month internship only to get fired, because at the same time I had an opportunity to go back to my old government job, which paid more and was more secure. So I thought I have to do that for family reasons, but I'm going to continue searching for developer roles. So it only took a month. It was much faster than I had expected it to be, and I'm really grateful for that. But it took me 4 weeks to go from leaving FreshBooks to my first day at my new job, which was yesterday. I think it was time. I don't know. It's hard to keep track of time. But it took 4 weeks. But it was a bit of a journey, a lot of uncertainty through that. There were many times when I left FreshBooks, after I left FreshBooks, working my government job, where I felt like, oh, to kind of get back in the swing, the old headspace, right? And many times I had to slap myself across the face, metaphorically, and say, no, don't forget about your goal, don't give up. There are many reasons why you're leaving the government. And it didn't take me long to remember why I was leaving the government. I have many good things, but also many bad things to say about government. Not necessarily the people, but just the structure, that's for another video. If anyone's considering working for government, I think there's a few key questions you could ask about yourself and what kind of person you are and whether or not you'd be a good fit for government. I'm happy to answer those. For me, I just reached a point of I was no longer growing. So that's why I pursued this new career in web development. It's an itch that I've had for so many years. I wanted to scratch, and pandemic and all those different criteria that come along that make you pull the trigger, and that's what led me down this path. That's an aside. But in terms of work experience, I had my 8 months of FreshBooks, which is absolutely foundational. 8 months, so important, so grateful. Great company to work at. I had some small contract experience. One of my friends was a web developer. I had just made a few commits to some of the projects, or a project he was working on, some of the features he was building in React and Ruby on Rails. I had my dog adoption Rails application, which is a decent little project. These were on my resume. These were the projects were on my resume at the end of leaving FreshBooks. So as it happened, like, how did I land this job? Well, during my last few weeks at FreshBooks, maybe last month, it was unknown whether or not I would be retained. And there had always been this kind of whisper of a promise that I would get hired on full time. I know that they really wanted to hire me. I got on really well with the team, management, managers, directors, seniors, all had really great things to say about me, because I put in my time, put in a lot of hard work to make sure that my references would be good. They wanted to keep me on, but they couldn't, just because one thing or another, who knows the reasons, but really they probably overhired in the pandemic and had to contract now that the interest rates gone up, debt was getting expensive. and they had to minimize their debt and cut their costs. And one of the ways you're going to do that to please the shareholders is through laying off staff. So there was no seat for me available other than a short-term contract. So I started applying for jobs knowing this, had that kind of gut feeling around it. And it's tough out there right now. As you probably know, there's been a ton of layoffs and there's a lot of competition. Some people theorize, with boot camps, a lot of boot camp grads, there's a lot of kind of junior uh, candidates out there applying for jobs, hundreds of roles for every job. And I'd felt this personally because a year ago, when I was applying for Rails jobs, I probably sent out 50 applications and got 8 kind of next stages where I was invited to an interview. And a couple of those proceeded through to, second, third interviews, technical interviews. None of them were actually fruitful, but I ended up getting my FreshBooks role via a LinkedIn connection. But fast forward 12 months to the last few months of my experience applying for jobs, I wasn't really getting any interest, even though I had more experience on my resume, which, you know, all things equal, you'd say wouldn't make sense, except that the conditions in the market had changed. And that I think there was a ton more competition and also a lot less hiring going on across the board if you're looking at total numbers. Though I did notice that a lot of small and medium sized companies were still actively hiring. Um, so I wasn't sure how long or if I'd even have success, how long it would even take to find a new role. I just kept throwing out applications, kind of just doing the faceless, cold applications. It's not a great way. People do find jobs that way, but for me, it's not how I found both of my jobs. I don't enjoy doing it either. I think you're better off getting a warm introduction, a referral if you can find one, and that comes through the networking. So luckily, my networking did pay off through what I'd done on LinkedIn for both of my jobs. As I said, this time round, I made a connection with a founder of a small SaaS company in Toronto. I honestly do not remember how I made this connection with him. It may have been I would sometimes search Ruby on Rails developers on LinkedIn and just add people with a quick note saying, "Hey, I'm entering the space, really interested, eager to learn, would love to connect with you." And I think that's how I connected with him many months back. Fast forward to me leaving FreshBooks. I made a post on my last day at FreshBooks. I made a post on LinkedIn stating that it was my last day. I'd had a blast and I was looking for my next opportunity in Ruby on Rails. And within hours, I had a comment on that post from this founder saying, "Hey, I'm actually looking for a Ruby on Rails developer. Here's the job posting. Take a look. If you're interested, send over your resume and we'll go from there." So I took a look and I was like, "Oh, this looks pretty cool." I checked out the company as I was interested in what their service or their value was providing. I dabbled a little in that space before as well. So I thought, this would be a good fit for me. I submitted my resume with, the updated experience on their FreshBooks. And the very next morning, he said, "Okay, let's do an interview." So we had an interview, and that went well. I had some questions around what my experience was in development, what I did at FreshBooks, the things I was working on. So I explained about the API integrations I worked on, as well as a solo project I did with adding a new user role to multiple services. I had questions around my approach to development, challenges that I've overcome, projects that I've worked on. And then I had some questions as well about the product, the workflows, kind of where the business is at. And that interview went well. So I got a request to do an assessment, which was it was kind of a combination between an aptitude kind of personality test and an IQ test. And I didn't enjoy that per se. I don't like those IQ kind of tests and kind of timed, match this square to this object. I just hate those things. But anyway, I did it, and you have to do it, and that went fine. So he was happy with that, and then he sent me a technical assessment, which was actually pretty damn involved. There was a lot of work going on there. It was to spin up a new Rails app, and get a third-party integration working with that through in that application with QuickBooks, and that took me a while to get maybe 75% of the work done. And it was provided to me with like, here's a task list, here's the general time frame you should take. I took a bit longer than that time frame, because I'd not seen this API documentation before. So, it took me a little to get my head around it. But I built about three-quarters of the features out with an explanation, good documentation on my approach, things I would do differently, and what I would then do to take care of the remaining 25% of the features, kind of my steps around that. Um, and that was reviewed by one of his developers, and it, seemed to be that I did fine. It was to a reasonable level, and that was good. That was good news. So next came the offer and the discussions around that. And during this time, I was still working in government, stable job, blah, 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 mortgage, kids, all that kind of stuff. You need to have a steady income coming in. So for me, it was a big decision to leave this job, though it wasn't a hard decision, but it was still a big decision, because, am I making the right step to the right company at this time? So I had a ton of questions when the offer came in around the company itself. I really wanted to make sure that I was stepping into something that was good, and you can't say safe, but at least lower risk. So I had a ton of questions around companies' kind of growth plan, profitability, funding, and then I requested I didn't request. I asked if I could talk to some of the people who work for this company, just to kind of interview them, have a conversation to see how they find working there. And the founder actually invited me to their stand up the following morning, which I thought was great, because I got to go in, see how they work, what they're working on, but more importantly, just see the vibe that the people had within that meeting. I got a sense of, are these people smiling? Are they happy? Are they kind of communicating healthily between each other? Are there any red flags here? And I didn't see any of those. It was actually a really good experience. So that gave me confidence as well, that I was stepping into something that was kind of well oiled, and the people were seemingly in good spirits. And then I had a load more questions about kind of my personal growth, support, things like that. And then it finally came down to compensation, and I negotiated a little bit there to get me a small bump up on the compensation as well. Adding in criteria and reasons why I thought I was worth a certain value. But I think in overall, I mean, the conversation seems fair, and after a couple of days there, it's I got a really good vibe of the company, and everyone that I've talked to is very happy there as well. Set up meetings. The first thing I did on day one was ask in the Slack channel, I want to meet everybody here just to get to know you and learn a bit more about you, and kind of break down those those remote barriers, let's say, that you get when you're isolated. And that's been a great way to spend a couple of hours in the first few days. I highly recommend doing that. Get to know your colleagues, and ask them questions about them, about their work, and just show genuine interest. So yeah, so far so good. Big difference from FreshBooks, coming from a company with 200 plus developers to a company with 10 staff. I'm the first developer that they've hired, though the founder and co-founder are the developers of the application, but they're stepping into, at least the founder stepping into, other roles to grow the business, and passing on all the development to myself. And I think there's more plans to hire other staff as well. It's a growing company, which is kind of exciting. Small, kind of scrappy, not startup, because it's been going for 8 years or so now, but still that vibe. of small, scrappy, growing, and navigating those complexities. There's a ton, I think, to learn for me in that, and just a ton to get invested in on Rails and learning, becoming an expert, I guess, in this framework. So yeah, that's the new offer that's been accepted. Very, very stoked to have it. I mean, that was the goal from day one in this whole journey, was to become a Ruby on Rails developer. And there's many reasons for that, but I think well, first of all, is my good friend is a self-taught developer. He's been doing it now for maybe 15 years or at least 10 years, and he got me into Ruby on Rails to begin with. And then the Odin project had originally was focused on Ruby on Rails and has a really good curriculum there. I'm so happy I found that. And I just grew to really enjoy using the language, Ruby, and the framework. And I'm very much a goal results driven person. So I like to see outcomes for effort quickly, and Rails allows that to happen. The convention over configuration takes care of a lot of the Rails magic behind the scenes. There's cost to that, yes, but when you're focused on building product, getting it out there, and iterating on what you've built, that to me is that drives me more than, let's say, diving in deep into the complexities of whether you want to spend hours debating in a group of developers on what's the precise best way, most optimized way to write a small snippet of code. That's great too, but at this stage in my career, I am interested in kind of scrappy growth and web development. So yeah, that's where we're at. Hopefully, that my last video inspired people. I had so many comments and messages. My last video on my internship offer that was accepted, so much positive feedback. So hopefully this one again is going to provide a little insight, inspiration, whatever it is that you take away from it. Do let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, fire away. I'll be happy to answer them, either in the comments or in a new video. But this is long enough, so I will cut it there. Have a good one.